Welcome back to the Neo Marketing Podcast. I'm Professor Pritchard. With me is Kyle Golding. Today we're going to talk about the concept of protocol.
Welcome to the Golding Group Neo Marketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of best practices, latest trends, and modern techniques for professional business communication, including advertising, marketing, digital channels, social media, public relations, and alternative options.
Kyle, how are you today, sir?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking, Pritch.
Yeah, well, 21 has started out a little bit weird, but we're hoping it's going to be a whole lot better, right?
Hey, what'd you expect after 2020?
Yeah, I did stay awake until midnight just to make sure it would go away.
There you go. We're on to a new one. New year, but same great Neo Marketing Podcast. Great topics, great ideas, helping the people with their communication issues.
Yeah. And one of the things that we started to explore last year that we want to continue to explore is this concept of protocol.
For sure.
So I've dug into some definitions of protocol, and I think as I go through those, I think you can begin to see what the purpose of a protocol is anyway through the definition.
Right.
And then I was lucky enough to find a 1997 article by Jim Lukashevsky, our good friend and crisis guru, who explicitly outlined protocols.
Okay.
Only piece I've ever seen in scholarship or trade publication. So I want to go through those things too.
So we'll have a 2021 take on what has been around since the 90s.
Well, since the late 90s, and thanks, Jim, for putting that stuff together, giving us a little bit of a place to push off.
Hey, so. We're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly. So one of the things that I found in trying to further define protocol was the thought that a protocol is an accepted code of conduct.
Simple enough?
Simple enough, right? Acceptable behavior in a particular given situation or a given group. Okay, makes sense to me. One of the other definitions I saw was a code of behavior.
Makes sense as well.
Okay, I get that. How am I supposed to behave, right? Or code of conduct.
The expected behavior.
Expected behavior, right? In the coronavirus situation, the pandemic, as we begin to roll out the vaccinations, there are protocols that they are using to figure out who gets what when. Right? Another definition is that it is a prescribed guide for conduct or action.
This makes a lot of sense in what we're talking about here, specifically in crisis communication, but also just general communication for a business is a guide is a good starting place.
Yeah, a good starting place. Yes. And if you think about it, and delve into computers at all and the world of the internet, everything ends with a P, right? TCP, HTTP, FTP.
They're all protocols.
IP, SMTP, and that P is protocol.
They're all protocols.
Exactly right. There was another definition I found that I really enjoyed, and that was a system of rules about the correct way to act in formal situations. Now
the key word there, formal situations.
Formal situations.
That's
right. But that system of rules really applies to how we talk about crisis communication and what we need to do.
For sure.
Codes of behaviors, manners, courtesies, that's the diplomatic definition of protocols, conventions, also called. So a set of rules for exchanging information between computers, going back to the everything ends with a P, all right? But by extension, that helps us to understand how to pass and exchange information with our stakeholders.
Yes.
Okay, so all of those things together hopefully give us a little better direction on what we're talking about when we talk about protocols. So Lukashevsky's article, 1997, we'll put the citation in the notes below, but it was establishing individual and corporate crisis communication standards, principles, and protocols.
Okay.
So it was actually in the title.
There it is.
It's the only thing I've ever seen that talks about protocols in any sense in public relations specifically with regard to crisis. So here we go. He calls these rules and tests to apply to achieve effective problem anticipating,
nice,
ethically sound,
fantastic
communication.
That's a great combination.
I love that.
That's super.
Problem anticipating, effective, and ethically sound communications.
You cannot lose your ethics because it's an emergency.
Absolutely.
The exact opposite is the only time you can truly demonstrate your ethics is when the pressure is on.
We talked before about one of the myths of crisis communication is that it exposes character.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
Exposes character. It doesn't make the character. It exposes character.
It exposes it, exactly right. So Jim's article talks about thinking about what recipients of corporate and organizational communication expect. He talks about it as a combination of attitude, behaviors, and specific language, which we really like as well.
Yes.
And then he goes on to expand 13 basic principles.
That's a lot.
He exchanges protocols and principles to, the same, but I think as we read through these or look through these, we'll see that they really are protocols as opposed to principles.
Okay.
So the first one is responsiveness.
Well, that makes sense.
The first protocol is responsiveness.
Sure.
I tell my students that we get an hour.
Right. You've heard that on this podcast before.
There is some scholarship that points to that, but that's based on my experience in the Navy, where within 1 hour of an accident or an incident, we had to have something to higher headquarters about what we're going to say.
I could tell you if I were to make my top 10 list of crisis communication failures in 2020. It's the new year. We get a lot of top 10 lists, right? Mm-hmm. I guarantee you everything on that top 10 list was driven by too fast, by being too fast and trying to be first with the information. It turned out to be the wrong information.
Well, and we'll go back to the apology impulse that we've talked about, and there are many examples in a book of people who waited too long or didn't do anything.
There's that as well, for sure.
So responsiveness would be
too many people right now are thinking, well, when it comes to crisis communication, maybe an hour is too long. What are you guys saying? What we're trying to tell you is it's not too long. You need to balance these things out.
Exactly. An hour gives you time to still have a relevant response, but it gives you time to gather.
It doesn't matter if you get the response out in 3 seconds if it's wrong.
Right. Exactly. as I've said,
or just unhelpful or ineffective.
Right.
It doesn't matter that you say something. What matters is that you deliver factual information.
Right. And as Lukashevsky says that we should talk about these problems as aggressively internally as we do in our external response.
I would double, triple down on that.
Yeah.
The key is examining and having hard conversations internally. It never leaves the room. It never leaves the table where it happens.
Right.
The circle of professionals, they have those conversations, the what ifs, the anticipation of problems, because everyone has them. No one's perfect. Everyone has potential to fail, no matter how good meaning, well-meaning they are. The failures happen. Sometimes, most of the time, it's no big deal. You just process it and move forward. But if you don't have those hard conversations about what if, and what if on things that people don't want to talk about, what if my CEO gets arrested?
Right.
What if our product hurts or kills someone?
Right.
What if the FBI shows up here and shuts us down because we're maybe in information or technology or something else that's sensitive? There's all kinds of things like that people really don't want to talk about. But if you don't, you've set yourself up for failure.
Right. Well, you have to have the hard discussions, and we advocate having those before you need the answer.
I'm going to go one step further. If you are a communication professional out there, if you are and not an intern, but if you're at a level of expertise, manager or above, and definitely if you're in the C-suite and you have marketing, PR, or communication in your title, and your CEO or other members of the C-suite or your board of directors, if they will not participate in this exercise, if they will tell you, I'm not going to have a conversation about when things go completely wrong, because I whether it's I don't want to have the attitude or I don't want to think about it or I just don't want to go there, that is an indicator of failure at leadership.
Absolutely.
And you should hold them to it, or you should be finding another place to work, because when it does happen, they're going to still blame you, even though you tried to make them be prepared.
Yeah. So reminding us again, when we're talking about protocols, we're talking about prescribed actions, prescribed guide for conduct or action. And the very first of those is responsiveness. So
yes.
1 hour is what we say.
We like it.
Again,
we call that responsive.
We'll be refining these as we go along. This is one that I've practiced while I was in the Navy, and it's openness.
Yes.
But here's the thing that Lukashevsky brings us to, and that is, if the public should know about a problem we have or about to have, which could affect them or our credibility, we will voluntarily talk about it as quickly and as completely as we can, especially to those most directly affected.
Yes.
So if they're going to find out anyway, give it to them.
Embrace it.
Embrace it.
This is the same thing as putting a "Do not touch this" sign on your electric fence.
Right. But
it's there. You know it's there. Common sense tells you it's there.
Right.
I'm going to go ahead and take one step further, tell you to please not touch it, so that we can avoid the issue of you touching the thing.
Right, exactly. But that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
If they're going to find out anyway, then let's be upfront. It's credibility, it's transparency,
Absolutely.
It's openness.
That's how you build trust.
The third thing he talks about is concern. So when business problems occur, we'll keep the communities and constituencies most affected totally informed
Yes.
and informed every step along the way.
Yes.
Right? And on a schedule that they accept, not our
That's
schedule.
right. The audience demand is all that's important.
That's
It's
exactly
not
right.
your rules, it's their rules.
Exactly right. And it's their expectations,
Yes.
and we've talked a lot about expectations here. Respect is number 4. We will answer any question any constituent may have and suggest and volunteer additional information in the event they do not ask enough or don't ask the right questions.
Yes, don't skate out on the things left unsaid.
We're not hiding behind, well, you didn't ask about that.
You failed to
Right.
ask about that. Semantics will get you in trouble every time when you
Absolutely.
try to play that game of you ask about this and not this.
Well,
be forthright.
It's respect.
That's
It is
right.
respect, right?
That's how you build respect, and that's how you lose respect. And you can be building respect for 10 years and lose it in one dirty trick.
Yeah, absolutely. Or one thing not said
Yes.
that should have been. Cooperation is the next one. We will cooperate with the news media as far as possible, but our major responsibility is to communicate compassionately, completely, and directly with those most directly involved. So we're going to play nice with the media. We're going to accommodate them. We're going to do everything we can, but our focus is going to be on
the consumer, the person, the
customer.
audience, the
Yeah.
people affected. Sometimes that effect is geography. It's happening in my town, and maybe it's going to literally come in contact with me. Sometimes it's how they do business. Maybe it's their credit card information or something else valuable. There's all kinds of ways that the stakeholders are affected by an issue, a negative issue within a business or within a scenario like that. And so the people most affected, the most like, is this me? Do I need to cancel my credit card? Do I need to leave this location? Do I need to protect myself in some way? Well, that's who you need to be communicating
That's
with. If
exactly
they have those
right.
questions, the general public or people that I was considering doing business with them, or just I knew that business existed, they can get this secondary. The people who really have specific questions that affect them are the absolute key to the communication issue right here.
And embedded in that protocol is a very important point, and that is communicate compassionately,
Yes.
completely, and directly.
And when you think about compassion, think about the golden rule. How would you want someone to communicate to you if you were in the situation? If you were the stakeholder being affected, what information would you like, and how would you like them to communicate with you?
Right.
Put yourself in their shoes and then do that.
Absolutely. Sensitivity is the next one. Responsibility is the next one.
Okay.
Unless incapacitated or inappropriate, the senior operating executive on site should be the spokesperson.
Put the boss out front, the person with the most to lose if this isn't done properly,
Yep.
and then let them do it properly, put their skin in the game.
And I have this conversation with students in my crisis communications class, but when is it appropriate to put your CEO out there? It's not always appropriate, but what Jim is calling out is the senior operating executive on site.
There you go.
So it may not have to be the CEO.
There's nothing more frustrating than someone leading a discussion with the media, with the public, and not being able to answer a question, or not feeling that they have the clearance, not understanding something, or saying, I have to go get that and bring that back to you. Now, it's an acceptable answer when you don't have that information. Right. But to put someone up there who can answer every question, cuts right to the chase, and it's all the combination of what we've been already talking about, how to communicate as quickly, effectively, efficiently as possible.
Right. And the other important distinction is, and we'll be talking about this further as we refine these protocols, but it's the chief operating executive. It's not the PR person. Nope. They don't want to hear from you.
The public doesn't trust you.
You should be behind the scenes anyway.
The marketing and PR people, guess what? They don't trust you because they know that you are trained to do this. So yes, behind the scenes, and for a good portfolio, if you will, for PR specifically and marketing professionals, when people say, what have you done? Tell me about it. You should be showing them your picture from behind the scenes. Here's me standing off camera with my client.
Right.
Here's me meeting with someone not on camera. Here's me doing the preparation work. Here's me, that is demonstration of what you do, not being on camera.
Right. And so many CEOs or senior executives tend to want to put you out there because you're trained. Yeah. Your responsibility as a PR person is to train them to be as good. Okay. Sensitivity is the next one. At the earliest possible moment, we will step back and analyze the impact of the problems we are having or causing.
Impact is the key word right
Absolutely. Our intention is to inform and or alert all appropriate audiences. But I like the concept of in the middle of the fray, pausing, stepping back, analyzing what we're doing, analyzing what our problem is.
Humans don't operate at their best when they're under great duress.
Right.
The step back.
Yep.
The take yourself back, give yourself a time period, whether it's that hour we discussed earlier or just a 10-minute step back here of step back, recalibrate, take a breath.
Yep.
Go back to your priorities, focus on what's important, and that little reset sometimes is just enough to manage whether it's an hour or 2 straight days of crisis communication, depending on the size and scope of what you're doing. But those occasional step backs will allow you to reset yourself and just continue to be effective. Focus on effectiveness, not in the motion of just doing the thing.
Well, and sometimes not just in communication, but in the actual response to whatever has happened. Right. Sometimes you can make things worse.
True.
So doing that setback, taking that step back and looking at it can help you avoid some of those things. Integrity, of course, we've talked about integrity. If we are at fault or there is the perception that we are, we will acknowledge the situation promptly, be empathetic, and explain our mistakes, if any, or the misperceptions as quickly as possible. What Jim's saying is if we deserve to get poked in the eye, we need to get poked in the eye.
Take your medicine.
Take it now. Absolutely. One of my instructors years ago, decades ago, told me that bad news never gets better with age, unlike a fine wine.
True.
Right? So, yeah, if we're at fault or there's the perception that we're at fault, let's fess up right away.
This also buys you credibility. We talked earlier about credibility, about trust, about respect, about ethics. When you own up to failings, when it comes time to actually push back on misinformation about, like, literally, we didn't do that, that's not our responsibility, and here's the actual information of what happened, the credibility comes with that when you previously owned up to your failures.
Yeah, absolutely. And that segues nicely into his next point, which is compassion. We will always exhibit concern, empathy, sympathy, remorse, contrition, whatever the situation requires.
At the end of the day, people don't do business with businesses. People do business with the people in a business. Businesses are comprised of people. Consumers are people. It's a people scenario. People often try to put the business structure, the brand, the mechanism in front of that.
Right.
And that's fine for logistics, but the actual transaction, the actual relationships, the actual trust and repeat, and all of these things come from the consumer, human beings, trusting and feeling valid in the communication that's coming from the humans within the mechanism. And so being a machine in delivering information, especially when it is sensitive, especially when it is emotional, especially when it is something that is going to affect people in their core as a human being.
Right.
Be a human, don't be a machine.
Exactly.
Because the people you're talking to are human. You're going to create a better connection, a better communication, and you get to move forward in a relationship as opposed to sort of an adversarial situation.
Well, we've talked about it a lot, the friction with the lawyers, and there's some great points in the apology impulse. We come back to that, but there is nothing that a lawyer or anybody else should argue with in terms of concern. No court case ever going to come from concern.
It's not going to convict you of anything.
Empathy, sympathy, contrition even, or remorse.
For sure.
I mean, none of those are going to cause any more problems in a court of law.
But the balance of that, now going back to the apology, the ideas of the apology impulse, is don't go out and show great remorse for the most minor of incidents.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it waters down anything that happens for you in the future.
We're talking about full-on reputational crises.
That's right.
Absolutely.
In actual crisis, you need to be remorseful. When in the slight failing of an everyday business transaction is something that can be moved on with.
Right, and I will probably go back and forth with that as we refine this list for sure, because there's some good points there that aren't in here. Consent. We don't think about this, and I hadn't really thought about it until I started rereading some of this stuff, but we will achieve consent based on viewing the issues from the perspective of our constituents, and we need consent to operate.
Yes.
So consent's kind of an important issue here. But we're going to get that consent as long as we take it from the viewpoint of those affected.
That's right, because we are creating a communication relationship. We're not jamming messages down their throat, and we're not lying to them or, watch Pritch's face, or spinning.
Jeez. Kyle,
I had to
you
slip
wanted
it in
to
there.
see me jump
and
over
I said
the desk.
we're not spinning. I'm against spinning. It's anti-spin.
Okay. All right, good, because now I cannot get exercised. His next point is accountability. We will use an aggressive, conclusive, and unassailably specific process to regain public credibility.
It is very specific in the definition of specificity. That's fantastic.
He talks about a 7-step process. We'll peel that out and take a look at that.
We'll explain that in detail in the future.
The aggressive, conclusive, and unassailably specific process to regain. Generosity. We will find a way to go beyond what is expected or required, even to do penance where appropriate.
It goes back to the human factor.
Absolutely. It absolutely does. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with his last point. Okay. I don't think we need to refine it very much, but it's honesty. Right?
You can't go wrong.
We will learn from our mistakes. We will talk publicly about what we've learned and renew our commitment to help keeping errors, mistakes, and problems from reoccurring. He says our goal is 0 errors, 0 defects, 0 mistakes, 0 crises.
Well, that's a nice goal.
It is a nice goal.
There's 0 reality to that.
We're gonna have to talk about that. But honesty as a protocol absolutely has to be in there. It absolutely.
And there's
has
also
to be in there.
Going back to that internal conversation. If you can't have brutally honest conversations internally, that whole doesn't leave the 4 walls conversation. If you can't have those with that level of honesty, you're in the wrong role, the wrong position, and ultimately you're going to end up because ultimately the people who won't have those conversations with you internally are going to say externally, no, don't be that honest. Don't be that honest with them.
Right.
Well, now you're failing.
Right. Now you're failing. Absolutely. So there you go. I think that's the foundation that we're going to build on over the next several podcasts.
I'm looking forward to breaking all these ideas down into individual pieces and then going back to this idea as a whole.
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's the goal. And so that we can make it applicable, practical, and understandable.
Yes.
So, and not to say that Jim hasn't done that. He set the table for us, but we're going to put the meal on the table.
We're going to do the podcast version of that and the 2021 version of it.
Absolutely.
So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, my hope is that it will go well.
I'm sure it will.
Otherwise, people will stop watching, right? Anyway, that's it for this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like, thumbs up, do all that good stuff for us.
Leave a review.
Most importantly, leave a review and send us your thoughts. Are we full of hooey? We haven't had anybody tell us that yet, and I'm up for the challenge.
It's okay. It's okay if you want to challenge us like that.
It's okay.
It would make for a very
right.
interesting follow-up podcast episode.
Darn right it is.
So hit us up on social media.
Yep.
Hit us up however you found this podcast, and let us know what you think.
Absolutely. So until next time, ciao.
Good luck.
This has been the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell a friend, leave a review, and engage with us on social media. Thanks for listening.